You know, a lot of things have been said about me, but quitter is not one of them.
Hillary Clinton taking a victory lap on the campaign trail after her 11-hour appearance before the House Benghazi Committee. And we're back now with the panel. Michael, Clinton and her supporters say that the committee Republicans basically didn't lay a hand on her during those 11 hours. Are they right?
Well, look, there was obviously no great historic made-for-TV moment that came out of it, but I don't think that was the goal. Trey Gowdy is a great prosecutor. He's trying to conduct an investigation. He's trying to get answers to questions that I think the American people need and deserve if we're going to have the type of governance that we should have. Why is it that we kept embassy staff in Benghazi when other countries like Britain had pulled them out? And if that reason was valid, why did we ignore 600 requests for additional security? Why is it that Hillary Clinton told her family that this was a terrorist attack? At the same time, she was telling the American people it was caused by a video. She told the father of one of the slain Americans that this was caused by a video. What's the role of Sidney Blumenthal? What business conflicts did he have with all this information that he's sending in? And ultimately, what role did the fact that all of this is going on 56 days before a presidential election? These are reasonable questions. They're questions the American people deserve to have answers to, and I think are highly relevant if we want to hold the Obama administration, the Secretary of State, and a future presidential candidate to the highest values that you would want to have in our government.
Bob, I want to ask you about another side of the hearing. Obviously, we talk about Watergate a lot, and parallels or differences. One of the differences, I thought, was I remember well on the Senate Watergate Committee, some of the Republicans actually asked tough questions about Richard Nixon. And in fact, as you point out in your book, it was a Senate Republican staffer who elicited the information about the Nixon taping system. Here is the kind of thing that Democrats were asking Hillary Clinton during this hearing.
Do we want to badge you over and over again until you get tired, until we do get the gotcha moment that he's talking about?
I wonder if you would like to comment on what it's like to be the subject of an allegation that you deliberately interfered with security that cost the life of a friend.
Are you surprised that not a single Democrat on that committee had a single pointed question for Clinton about the very real issue about what happened in Benghazi?
Well, Watergate was about a series of crimes well established, and so it was the Republicans who eventually turned on Nixon, and it was a bipartisan inquiry. Here it's not. It clearly is partisan. And, you know, look,
But the death of those 4 Americans isn't partisan.
No.
And her conduct
there are
isn't.
Legitimate questions here.
But they didn't ask him.
Yes. Well, but here's the issue. You have inconsistencies, but this is a tragedy, and it should be investigated. You're right. And she should answer, and, you know, she did or attempted to answer all of those questions. But there's no crime here on her part. And to try to criminalize this or suggest it, as some people have said, oh, she'll be in jail, or so. I mean, there's no evidence of a crime. There is evidence of inconsistency. I mean, my God, this is our business, our lives. People saying one thing privately and saying something different publicly.
Well, does that bother you that as Gowdy seemed to point, I'm sorry, as Jim Jordan seemed to point out, that she was saying, blaming it on the video publicly, but telling Chelsea that it was an attack and telling the Egyptian prime minister?
It better bother us, and this is the question we're going to look at. And, you know, if she's the nominee, she's going to get a full field investigation by everyone. So will the Republicans, so we don't get what we got with Nixon, which we didn't know about, quite frankly. I mean, that this was hidden. So I think there's a big burden on journalists, on television, in the newspapers, bloggers. So when we get to Election Day next year, people can say, you know what, I know, or I had the chance to know everything possible about these people. And so this hearing is one of the pieces of the puzzle.
Kristen, what's your read on the hearing? Seems to be the consensus in this town, is she now free and clear politically, both on Benghazi and the emails?
I think they're 2 very separate issues. I think the Benghazi investigation unveiled the fact that there was potentially very classified information being stored on a private server in her own home, but that's a very separate issue from, did she, as Secretary of State, handle the Benghazi issue correctly. I don't think either of them are necessarily behind her, because you had 52% of Americans who said they viewed the Benghazi hearing as, they said the investigation into Benghazi is justified. And Hillary Clinton is only viewed as honest and trustworthy by about a third of Americans. So I don't think that she's put this behind her, though ultimately at the end of the day it may come down to the FBI investigation that determines whether this affects the race or not.
Juan.
You know, sometimes I listen. I mean, it sounds to me like, you know, Michael wants to relitigate this, and what about this? We've had 7 committee hearings, spent millions of dollars. I thought conservatives were concerned about spending money recklessly. Look, the hour after this ended, remember, this went on from 10 in the morning till 9 at night. So in the hour afterwards, Hillary Clinton raised the most money from small donors, from anybody, but a majority of them were small donors, that she's raised in the whole campaign. So that tells you that Democrats, and remember we're talking about a Democratic primary here, Democrats thought she did exceedingly well. You look at the poll numbers. Her numbers have gone up in Iowa and nationally since these hearings. So the fact is, if you even talk to conservatives, conservative writers in this town, from Eric Erickson to Byron York to John Podhoretz, they all said she did very well. One of them said you might as well have sworn her in.
Michael?
Yeah, look, this will have an impact on her. It'll have an impact because everybody has built into their baseline when you're dealing with the Clintons that they're going to mislead, they're going to obfuscate, that there's always going to be a scandal hanging over them. That's just something that everyone knows about the Clintons. The case that Hillary made in 2008 was take all that for granted. At least I'm competent. You want me to pick up the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning when there's a scandal. And I think that coming through this, she doesn't look competent. The British pulled their embassy staff out of Benghazi. Why didn't we? And why did we ignore 600 requests for extra security? She had an email server in her house with classified documents on it. She surrounded herself with staff. You can tell a lot about somebody's management style by who they surround themselves with. And nobody either had the good judgment or felt comfortable enough saying to Hillary, hey, you know what, maybe storing emails on a private server in your bathroom isn't a good idea. And so she no longer looks competent.
But these are all legitimate questions, but the hearing was a big home run for her. Let's face it, part of the job of being president is dealing with inconsistency, dealing with adversaries, and endurance. She really showed that she can sit it out, and you know, she says she's not a quitter. That is, in fact, true.
If you want a president who can testify.
Let's not forget that the other reason why her poll numbers might change in the next week or two is that half of her competitors have either left the presidential race or decided not to enter it. So we won't know necessarily if Hillary Clinton's path to the Democratic nomination is sealed at this point. You know, we won't know if that's necessarily because of this one hearing or a variety of other things that have sort of broken her way.
Remember, she also did well in the debate. Biden didn't get in. But most of all, there was no gotcha moment, and Republicans were girding. They had built up this hearing. This is where we're going to expose Hillary. Didn't happen.
If you want a president who can testify for 11 hours, then Hillary Clinton may have helped herself. If you want a president who has the judgment not to keep confidential information on a private server, she didn't do a good job.
All right. Nobody ever gets a final word around here, except now I am going to. Thank you, panel. See you next Sunday.